Councilmember Goff? Here. Councilmember, oh, sorry. Councilmember Nowicki?
Here.
And Councilmember Walker will be absent.
Thank you very much. We have 3 items tonight. The first one is the Municipal Court Triennial Update. So Municipal Judge Amanda Bailhash will present this item. Hello.
Hello, good evening. And Mr. Johnson is here today as well if you have any questions specifically from court operations, things that I can't answer. So we've had a good, I guess, trimester. Things are going well. We're having in-court all sessions are in person. We're trying to figure out where to put the virtual appearances for people that can't appear in person. As you've seen by the monthly reports that Mr. Johnson sends to you, our numbers are increasing, and so our dockets are getting bigger. And so we're, actually, Mr. Johnson has been doing a lot of case flow study and data, I guess, examination to see where we can put cases and how we can move them to make our court sessions a little bit more efficient. And so, and Ms. Osmus has been working on that as well. And so I think we're going to have to move the virtual sessions, or that's something that we've been talking about, because we have, as you probably remember, we have 3 Spanish interpreters come every Thursday at 10:30, which has been great because it helps our Spanish-speaking population be able to have access to the court, meet with the prosecutor, and speak with me. But that obviously makes the morning take longer, and so we're trying to figure out where we can put the virtual sessions. And that goes into my next operations, as we're trying to figure out what we should do to make the docket more efficient. We're in the process of trying to make some other speeding to the 6.20 to 24 payable ahead of time, and that is in process, and we're working on getting that done to help give people opportunity to not show up in court if they want to take advantage of that. Another thing that, and a lot of this Mr. Johnson gets credit for, I should say most of it. The other thing that we're doing to help increase efficiency during docket days is having Amanda Rice do case management of defendants who are not sentenced to probation. So I'd say a standard sentence is you have to get 24 hours of community service and a class done within 90 days. And so at that 60-day mark, if the person hasn't completed it, Ms. Rice will reach out to them and say, hey, your stuff is due in 30 days. And so we're hoping that that will help increase compliance and hopefully reduce the docket congestion. And then going backwards, we're still doing our community service program 2 Sundays a month, which is something that I'm really proud of that we have here in North Glen to serve our juvenile population. As far as community involvement, we kind of, since the last time we saw you, it was summer and beginning of school year. So the only thing we've really had is the Fresh Start. So this was the second time that Adams County put together a clear warrant day. When we went in 2023, Mr. Johnson and I actually went out to Brighton and sat there, and I don't think we cleared any that time. So this year, our idea is because it was held on a Friday, which is when Crew is in session, and especially now that Crew is up at the Justice Center, I was available that Friday morning from 9 to 12 while Crew is available. And actually, we had a defendant come in and clear 2 of his warrants who was not there for the warrant clinic. He was there for Crew, but it worked out, which was the whole idea of us being there. And we were the only municipal court that cleared a warrant that day, so that felt good. I think actually it's good that Jessica's here because it's probably Crew and the resource office hours more so than us, but it was good to participate that. And then the last time I was here, you all wanted to know what our status was with community court. And so Mr. Johnson and I had a meeting with the city prosecutor, and then we also included Crew and our probation officer, and we've decided that it's going to be a pre-plea problem-solving court model, separate from our normal proceedings. And so it'd be like a diversion program for adults, basically. So a lot of prosecutors' offices have diversion programs, and cases get referred by the prosecutor to diversion. And as long as they complete the program, then the case is dismissed. And so that's the concept. It would still be a treatment court model or a problem-solving court model with a person. We'd have court once a month, and people would come in, and we'd work in a partnership with Crew. And the idea is to meet during doing resource office hours to increase attendance. So Mr. Johnson and I have started reaching out to different district attorneys' offices that have diversion programs, and these are all state prosecutors' offices, and so we're getting information from them. And I think it might be Adams County is actually in the process of redeveloping their policies and procedures and is interested in meeting with us as well. So we're working on that to get that moving forward. And I think that is most of our update. Any questions?
Councilmember Kondo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I did a ride-along about almost 4 weeks ago, and we ended up on one of the call-outs, basically picking up a person who was, I guess he failed to come in on a PR, personal recognizance. And so it begged the question for me, as somebody who's living out on the streets, do we try and reach out to them vis-a-vis text message? How do we, what are the modes that we use to reach out to folks that maybe are not traditionally or more routinely connected as?
So if we have a
Homeless
phone number
people.
for them, we do send text reminders about court dates. So Mr. Johnson sends that out 2 days before court? A day or two before court. So if we have a phone number, if the name is familiar to me, I often will email a show cause citation to the crew program because they kind of also do general mail delivery. And so sometimes I'll set a show cause and hope that maybe that person stops into the resource hours or has contact with one of the crew members to get them into court. And so those are really our only ways of reaching out to people to try to get them in before a warrant is issued or if they fail to appear. But if the name is not familiar and we don't know if they have any contact with crew, and I don't have a phone number for them, unfortunately, I don't really have a mechanism for notifying people that they've missed court.
So one other follow-up, and that is, what happens to this individual, and not giving names or anything like that, but if they do not appear, do you just issue another bench warrant, or what happens?
Yeah, so if a person doesn't appear for the first time and we don't have a phone number or an address for them for a show cause citation or to notify them, I almost always will do a personal recognizance bond on the first warrant, which means they don't have to post any money, they just have to sign their name for it. I think, if a Northland officer does it, the officer can take care of the bond. If it's Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, they can come to the counter and post the bond. If it's at any other jail, they can post the bond. The majority of my warrants are Adams County only warrants. So if somebody's in Castle Rock, they're not going to get arrested on our warrant, depending upon the seriousness of the crime. But for kind of the warrants that I would classify as a result of homelessness or mental health illness are Adams County only. And so if it's a PR bond, the officer doesn't have to drive them out to Brighton. After persons fail to appear a couple times, I will issue a cash or surety bond in the hopes that we can hold the bond hearing within the 48 hours. If we can't hold the bond hearing within 40 hours, our clerk that processes all the detainers automatically issues a PR bond, so I don't make people sit the full 48 hours before we issue a PR bond, because the clerk, she knows our schedule and she knows if we can't see them, or she knows we could see them within 40 hours, but she can't get a lawyer for them, then she automatically PRs them as well. And I've given her, the judge before me gave her that authority, and I thought it was important to keep that authority there because the clerks are there Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and I'm only there 2 days a week. I think it's important for them to have that authority to make sure that we're not holding people just for the sake of holding people.
Okay, gotcha, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Welcome, Judge Bill Hash. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. Thanks for the update. I would just love, just for our residents, a little bit more information on the community court. I know it's a diversion program, and it says you're still developing the program description as well as policies and all of that good stuff. But I am just curious if you've already identified stakeholders that would be involved? Would this be, diversion to mental health services, addiction services, other things like that, just for public knowledge, a little bit of what that might entail? And I know you're working with Crew, so they have all those good connections to community resources.
Yeah, so the purpose of the community court program is to meet the defendants where they're at and get them stabilized in our community so that they can be successful. So for example, a traditional sentence would be 24 hours of community service, do a petty theft class, or pay a $250 fine or something like that. A person that would be in this program, instead of doing a certain hours of community service, would be do certain hours of positive contact. So go meet with a doctor. That's an hour of service, right? Make sure that you're meeting with Jessica Holes or Jamie or whoever your case manager is. That's an hour. Get to your mental health therapy or your case manager. That's an hour. And so instead of traditional community service, it's more of making appointments and doing things that are going to help you get stabilized in your community. Sometimes a requirement would be get your driver's license or an ID. And then we have all the same connections that Crew has access to as far as mental health, addiction services, and things of that nature. So the idea is to get people stabilized in the community. And the incentive of them participating in the program and seeing the judge once a month is that at the end, the whole case gets dismissed rather than having a conviction on their record.
Okay, that sounds good. And so you would connect them to those resources as needed, where needed.
Right. So kind of the pilot that we've done in the past is for the court sessions when they come in. So first they come to the program and they would probably, they would meet with me or meet with Jessica, and we'd kind of figure out like what the requirements of the program should be for them, and we want to tailor it to each individual's needs. And then each court review, I get an update of where they're at and what they've accomplished.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that
Okay.
makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you.
You're
Thank you very
welcome.
much.
I don't see any more questions. Thank you so much for being here for this update.
So I have my own update. As you all know, my contract is up for renewal at the end of January, and I have decided not to apply to renew my contract. You all know I have two boys. I have a middle schooler in 7th grade and a 4th grader, and I knew I was going to get weepy. I was going to try really hard not to, because I'm really honored to have been working for the city for the last 5 years, but I just need to spend more time with my family right now. And as this city is growing, which is, I always talk about when I ask people, it's funny, the city, there's not a lot of land left in the city, but the city is growing, the population is growing. There's a lot of services that we can offer our residents, and in order to really be effective at this job, I need to give more time to this position, and I'm not in the position to give the time that this position deserves. And so my hope is that you'll find a replacement that will be able to give more time than I can and really continue developing the programs. My commitment is to stay on for as long as you need me. I'm not, when my contract expires, if you'll have me and Corey approves it, I will stay on for as long as you need. I would like it to be a very smooth transition to my replacement. If you want me to stay and train the person, I would be honored to do that. I'm committed to getting the community court program finished before I leave. I'm committed to working with Ms. Osmus and Mr. Johnson to get our dockets under control before I leave. I want to leave the court in really good shape and make it a very smooth transition. So happy to, and I was debating, how to tell everybody, and it felt wrong to send an email because it felt very impersonal, and I have to meet with all of you at once. And so I didn't want to kind of drop a bomb, but I just couldn't think of a better way to do it. So I am happy to answer any questions that any of you have. But my guess is probably more questions for Corey and Heather.
Yeah, we can talk about process later. I think I know I speak on behalf of council when I say we were very thankful to have you for the time that we did. You're very talented, you're very passionate, you're very good at your job. It is a huge loss for us, but we know that family comes first. I appreciate you coming and telling us tonight. It's hard to hear, because those are going to be some hard shoes to fill. And we will work with our city manager and our city attorney to, figure out a process. I think it's really just about thanking you for being here tonight and giving us the update and letting us know your news in person. But I'm sure we're sad.
I'm sad too.
I know. Sometimes it's just that time.
Yes.
So, okay.
All right.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Next up tonight is the Crisis Response Unit update. Crisis Response Unit Manager Jessica Hulse is here to present.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's fun to be here in the new chambers. Nice to see you. I am here tonight to provide an update. I want to get myself situated with the new technology here. To provide you guys with a new the crew update for our final update for this year in 2024. So as you know, the background of the Crisis Response Unit, we were approved by Council in October of 2021. The crew was designed to take referrals from our North Glen Police Department, our municipal court, our neighborhood services, and then from residents themselves. And that often includes community members. So whether that be a school that the person's going to, a hospital that's within our community, or concerned neighbors and residents, we consider those community referrals. The Crisis Response Unit is covered through ARPA through the end of 2024, and we always make our monthly reports available on the website. So every time I do our updates, I bring in some of our statistics. These are our numbers through October 22nd of this year from January 1st. And just to bring in the totals, the crew worked with 478 new referrals. So that's not total number of people, but that's the new referrals as of this year, resulting in 4,599 services. And that is a total of services. So for everyone that we worked with. Before I came, so a little bit earlier today, I did get an email from a council member asking me to compare these two numbers past. So I did make this, if I can just pass this to you.
Sure.
So what this says is it breaks it down to our new referrals in 2023 for the same time frame, as well as our service numbers, and they grew, so that's not a surprise. And then I did do the average point of contact per referral, and so that's 7.4 contacts per person in 2023, and it averaged out to be 8.8 contacts per person in 2024. And when I looked at these numbers, one of the reasons I think that might be is you'll see that the numbers from the police department and our neighborhood services grew. Both of those take up a little bit more of our time with our case management, because when we're getting referred through our police department or our neighborhood services, people's lives have been destabilized. So it takes a little bit more to work with them. And then if you see our community numbers, they actually dropped. So in 2023, we had 32 new referrals. I'm sorry, they also grew. I had that backwards in my mind. But anyways, the PD and definitely the community or the neighborhood services, those clients of ours take up a lot of our time. Neighborhood services, those are individuals that are having a difficult time keeping their homes compliant with code enforcement cases. And so typically that will show that there's something that's going on in the household to destabilize that unit. And it takes a little bit of time and quite a few points of contact to be able to help that family stabilize. So the crisis response unit really has 3 different pillars that we work in, and one is crisis intervention. I'm going to go through the 3 pillars: crisis intervention, homeless intervention, and targeted violence prevention. When we're talking about crisis intervention, our role when we show up on scene is to really connect that person to resources. So we're looking at therapeutic resources, possibly a hospitalization, other financial assistance, transportation sometimes is the easiest one, and then just case conferencing with other organizations that they're involved in. And that's really just to bring stability back to a person's life. When we are working with homeless intervention, that's when we're looking at our encampment response here in North Glen, which is when we are doing community rounds on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We work in coordinated effort with our Parks Department on those days. We also provide the walk-in resource hours on Fridays up at the Justice Center from 9 a.m. until noon. And then we participate in regional meetings, including our Built for Zero campaign here in Adams County, our Adams County Employment Case Conferencing, and that's where so the Workforce Center created an Up in Adams, which is employment specifically for people experiencing homelessness. It comes with housing as well. Participating in the SWAP partner with Almost Home, that's the Severe Weather Activation Program, and participating in Adams County Regional Alignment on Homelessness meetings, which happen every other week. And when we're looking at targeted violence prevention, this is the newest thing you've heard me talk about, I think, over the past 2 updates that I've been in. And this is when we're looking at behavioral concerns in the community and seeing what can go to stabilize those behavioral concerns so that person is no longer on this destabilizing pathway, but on a better path to keeping themselves safe as well as the people around them safe. This did come with some training. So we did get 5 members of our crew team, 6 of our officers trained, as well as 1 of our criminalists trained. We also hosted a regional training. I've spoken on a panel at CU about municipalities that are starting their own targeted violence prevention programs, and I'm about to speak at the Rocky Mountain chapter of the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals, which will be hosted down in Colorado Springs next week. With this, the things that we are still working on is getting a proper screening tool, because there's lots of information out there about what a behavioral concern is. It needs to meet a certain threshold before it's going to go through kind of this threat assessment process. And we're trying to get an evidence-based screening tool. The one that we are focused on is called the TRAP 18. That stands for Terrorist Radicalization Assessment Protocol. The other one that we are going to be moving forward with at the moment is a partnership with the CU police, and they developed one through their CU research team, and it's more geared towards patrol officers rather than the TRAP 18, which is more geared towards FBI. And what CU has developed is called the TV LAP, and it's called Targeted Violence Lethal Assessment Protocol. And it's just a series of screening questions to show, who should be evaluated for going through a whole threat assessment and bringing in lots of team members to support the person that is just demonstrating concerning behavior. And then third, that will take a financial commitment, is becoming a member with the Association of Threat Assessment Professionals. And that's just to stay in good standing, have access to the best training, and possibly attend the conference. So the most interesting thing I do with these updates is provide case studies. So our crisis intervention case study, that was a 73-year-old in our community that ended up at a store, a local store, and they were having an acute mania phase that came with some psychosis. And this person sat down in an office chair and refused to leave and demanded to be arrested. And nobody on scene wanted to arrest this individual. The store wanted them to be gone. They were going to be pressing trespassing charges. And so the officers did detain the person and brought them back to the PD and asked for us to do an assessment in our center over at the Justice Department. When crew went on, we did assess the person. We found that they met the criteria for a mental health hold. They were delighted at that point in time through their mania. So this person was the most cooperative mental health hold we could have ever had. They told me if they had known that this was going to be their day, they would wake up earlier so they could participate in more of it. So thankfully, we had a lot of officers with like a kind touch that day as we walked through this assessment protocol. We explained to the person what was going to go on the entire time. During that time, crew was able to research and find their family members, which live out of the city, and contact them for some historical context. They said that this was the best thing that could happen for the person. They really needed to be evaluated. They were brought into the hospital, and then they were reunified with their family a couple weeks later. And it was the best outcome for that person. For our homeless intervention case study I have, so this, I wish that judge had stuck around because she would be so happy about this one. So there's a 38-year-old individual in our community. They have 24 open municipal cases. So one of the questions was, what happens when, they keep coming back, and do they just keep getting PR bonds? This person had 24 open municipal court cases, and one of them has a larger cash surety bond in it. Nobody thought that this person was thriving in the jail or was going to be able to participate in their own court process. So the judge, the prosecutor, the defender, and crew came up with a furlough for the person, that they would be furloughed from the jail, from Adams County Detention Center, to a rehab center if that's where they wanted to go. They could stay in jail or they could be furloughed to a rehab center. Their public defender went to the jail. They coordinated the intake with the rehab center that crew had been coordinating with, and the rehab center ultimately said that they needed to be more mentally stable. So at that point in time, the jail put the person on a mental health hold in a community setting, unfortunately, because then that community setting then said that the person was free to go. So now the person is back out, but we now have a process in place because I'm sure that their 24 cases are not closed yet, so we might be going through this again, and at least we have the process set in motion, and everyone knows they've done their intake, they've been cleared to go, and I'm hopeful that the next time that we get that far, they will be stable enough to enter into treatment. And clearly with 24 open cases, this has been going on for quite some time, and so we're going to hopefully see that exit ramp off the cycle. And for a case study about our targeted violence prevention, we have a youth in our community, goes to school here in North Glen, but does not live in North Glen. They have concerning behavior, concerning ideologies, they have ongoing family conflict, all the things that could be making a young person's life pretty difficult, they have it going on. And when this case came to us, we were the ones to notify the school of the concerning issues. We were then able to work with the school, get the kiddo assessed for an IEP, which brings in more funding to bring in more permanent support systems for them. We were able to work with their family across jurisdictions with Thornton PD to make sure that their neighbors were feeling safe. And now the kiddo is able to be in school full-time, has support services so the other kids in school are also safe, and we're looking forward to getting more services. We actually have a meeting tomorrow with a bunch of organizations for this person. So that's kind of a way that the targeted violence prevention works. We saw concerning behavior, we were able to bring it to, to everyone's attention before anything happens, and then we're able to put support services to bring them off their pathway to violence. I always like to give a little snapshot in time of what other co-responder programs are looking across in Adams County. So North Glen, we have our internal co-response team, which also manages our homeless intervention team. Adams County, they have now gone to an internal co-response team. We were able to sit on their hiring process for their counterpart to myself, their supervisor, and now they are hiring their co-responders. Brighton has a co-response team through Reaching Hope. Federal Heights has a co-response team also through Reaching Hope. They have not yet hired their co-responder, so they are working on it. Thornton has an internal co-response team, and Westminster has an internal co-response team. Westminster and Thornton have also started their targeted violence prevention programs as well. So a potential financial impact. So this is one of the questions I get asked is, how many people are you housing? And we are also starting to track the number of nights averted by using shelters as well. So in 2025, I'll be able to report on those. But right now, we have our long-term housed, and in the month or in the year of 2024, we have housed 33 people successfully so far. By the end of the year, that will be 37. So we have 4 people that are in the works. 3 of them will most likely be housed next week. We're just waiting for their units to open up, but everything else is done. So with that, when you look at a study done by the National Alliance to End Homelessness from 2017, and adjusted for inflation, then the average tax savings would be $200,000, 508. And I'm going to be looking for an updated number to that 2017. I just haven't found a good number yet. But in 2025, I'll start using that. As for grants, so we were awarded the opiate settlement grant that we're in the middle of using. We've distributed some of those funds directly towards direct services for individuals. We were also awarded the regional transportation grant, which was for RTD passes. We were not awarded the Department of Justice grant, and that was going to fund a lot of that training through the targeted violence prevention program, and that's okay. But we were awarded the Adams County Public Health Department grant, and that's using the more ARPA dollars through Adams County. That is going to be coming to you in the form of an IGA on November 18th. So that will be presented to you. But that money can be used for the hiring of a co-responder, the hiring of a case manager, a new secure transport vehicle, other training for crew, onboarding technology costs, as well as safety equipment. And currently, the crisis response unit's budget is $506,662, with the $64,861 being our operating budget for our supplies and direct services for clients. And then we also have one program manager, 4 co-responders, and we also have an intern who's been great. And he's with us getting through his second, so his master's level internship through Walden University, and we have him through the month of February. And that's it. So thank you. Thanks for your time, and any questions?
Councilmember Nowicki?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mrs. Holst, for being here. Always good to see you. And I really appreciate your, first of all, always bringing the case studies, and also your creativity and flexibility, and hearing the judge speak as well. Just your willingness to kind of work together with her to kind of problem solve these very difficult cases. Going back to the services and the case study in particular, can you go back to the first case study?
Sure.
And we'll just use that as a case study.
Sorry.
Oh.
There we go. We're there.
Yeah, so that one. How many services would this be considered in this one case study? Is that one service or is that
Yes.
multiple services?
That was the one service.
Okay, that,
So
so-
it's many hours, right? So from the initial assessment, I'm sorry, there's probably 2, because Jamie did respond to the store in question when the person was demanding to be arrested. So Jamie would have been putting in a case service for the on-scene. I would have put in a case service for the assessment and transport to the hospital, which would count as 1.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have one service be as little as, what, 15 minutes?
Correct.
And one service be as long as
Yeah.
6 hours, probably?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, interesting. Thank you.
Yep.
Councilmember Jaramillo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the wonderful presentation. I also enjoy all the case studies demonstrating the impact that you have in the community in the diverse ways. I love that we've also been leading the way, having an internal co-response team. But I'm just thinking of a couple situations just to be proactive for people who are, for crisis intervention, for people who are seniors or veterans who are on fixed incomes. Do you have, financial resources or transportation
I guess, ways with the city, or anything you can, provide the public for some people who are just having troubles getting around? Maybe they can no longer drive anymore.
Sure.
Or,
Bound.
yep, yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So we work with people like that quite a bit. I would say, even if they aren't qualifying as a crisis, but they just want information, we can always share information. Sometimes, if they can handle a lot of that, like the application process on their own, then we're going to encourage them to do that. If they can't handle that application process on their own, we will work with them. The various things that we would refer them to is helping them get a live RTD card would be one, which is the lower discounted RTD pass that people can have. If they had a appointment to a doctor per se, or court, or financial assistance application meeting, then we could always schedule a Lyft ride. That funding is limited, so I could easily spend our entire budget on Lyft rides for people, but so we have to be a little bit cautious with that, or conservative with that. And then we also have our own crew car that we are now able to transport people in. We cannot transport M1, so mental health cases, but if it's a person who is safe and just needs access to a community organization, if they need, help getting to their doctor's appointment or their dentist appointment or coming to City Hall to pay a bill or something like that, that's something that we can work with them on. Without, blasting that to the city and becoming a taxi service. It's really case by case. We try to work with people to stay as self-sufficient as they can. But if they can't, then that's certainly when we step in.
Right, definitely. I could think of some situations where, it's going to be snowy outside. Possibly you have somebody who can't, walk down Community Center Drive to services on a 120th and, safely without injuring themselves. So that's why I was.
Yeah. And then we also help them understand what comes with their medical benefits. So if there's VIA or medical lift services, and then also there's some that will also do groceries or grocery deliveries. So if someone's, constantly can't have access to food, then we teach them how to use the grocery delivery services as well. And that is also paid for through SNAP benefits. So that's not a barrier.
Wow, this is great information. I'm glad I asked this question.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kondo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, thank you for providing the numbers from 2023 corresponding period. And just to continue on where Councilmember Nowicki was going with this question, I just looked at the total new referrals from 2023 to 2024, and that grew at 4.1%. Yet the services grew at 36%. And then I also looked at the mix of persons experiencing homelessness over the total. It's roughly about 35%. So I wonder if you might be able to explain what is driving such a huge double-digit increase in services.
Sure. And I thought about that as well. I think one of it is we added a service, which is research. So when we are in the office, because sometimes doing research for a client takes an hour or two. So if we are doing extensive research for someone, I wanted a way to track that's what we're spending our day doing. And so we did add that, that data point. So that would be some of that increase in services, is that we're now tracking the research that we do for people.
Okay, I understand. Because the other thing that I did, you know me, I'm the math guy. You can call me Count Dracula now. Actually, Halloween's past, but, I did the math to figure out in terms of all the services divided by 5 FTE, the number of people on your staff. So that roughly, doing that, it comes out to roughly 3.2 services worked on per person per day. Just some very loose math. Does that sound about right?
No. I think what's not being accounted for there is vacation time off. So I think we get, 2 weeks per person. So that would have to be deducted from those days, holiday time, those sorts of things. So I don't think, no, three contact points per day does not sound accurate. Yeah.
Gotcha. Because then I was trying to reconcile it with the contacts per person that you
Sure.
had calculated there. So maybe we can get offline because maybe my math is erroneous. One last question, and that is disappointing that, no, not disappointed in you, disappointing that we weren't able to get the federal grant. But I think you mentioned that this, the TVP program is something that's being done by University of Colorado, is that
That is correct.
correct?
Yep.
Is there any opportunity for the university to provide some funding or financial backing?
So I don't think that the university would provide funding. What they will provide is their assessment tool. So, and they will tailor that to be North Glen's model. So right now it's developed for the CU police model, but Sarah, who's their researcher, she wants to partner with our city as well as with Thornton City and develop the assessment protocol to be what we need it for. One example of that is the CU Police Department are training their patrol units on each call to go through this checklist. And right now, I think that we want the referrals to still come from patrol, but for our screening team in the TVP, our core team, to go ahead and fill out that screening tool so we know which ones we're going to move forward with a threat assessment on. So those are some of the tweaks that we're making, and we're working with Thornton to do it as well, because Thornton has gone in side by side with their training with North Glen.
Gotcha. And then, given the increases that I just kind of figured out here, are you thinking that you'll need another headcount here in the near future or a couple of years, given the
Another
trend?
FTE, you mean?
Yes.
That's a great question. So our grant that we were awarded will allow us to hire 2 FTEs. Those are slated to end in 2026. So I think we'll have more data as we move forward of having those FTEs. And we're doing 2 different things. One, we're going to hire if the IGA is signed, so I don't want to get ahead of myself there, but if the IGA is signed, then we would hire 1 co-responder to be on the Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday mornings. Tuesday would be an overshift, and then we don't have an extra co-responder like our full staff on Saturday, Sunday, or Monday mornings right now. And then we'd hire a case manager. And the case manager position is the one I think would be harder for us to give up. And that's a lot of that desk work of doing those research and applications and just doing follow-up with people and maybe having someone to sit up for our municipal court days and just catch the people that Judge has been talking about, or sitting in on, like riding around with our neighborhood services team and that sort of thing. So that's more of that case manager position, which will be a new position for our crisis unit. Because right now we all case manage our own cases. So it'll be information that's developed over the next 2 years. There's certainly not going to be an ask from council over the next couple of years. The grant kind of builds it in, and we are prepared to have. The question was, do we want to move forward with a grant that we might have to end those positions? And that's the expectation at this point in time. And I think it's better to go ahead and move forward and see what we can do. And just say, no, we don't need it.
Councilmember Roper.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for this amazing report. It's really good to see the real-time data and hear about how this is impacting our own community. I've seen it firsthand just on my ride-alongs, and just how it's really created that sense of support and stability for our residents, and that connection, even, maybe before they are taken on a hold or different things, so they have a familiar face to look at when they come out. I just really appreciate it, and I think this is very valuable, and thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Goff.
Thank you, Mayor. And Jessica, thank you. This program has grown. It's amazing, and we appreciate all you do for the city. So I just wanted to say that first. Great presentation. So my question is about this case study as well. And the way you described it was that because crew was available, they were able to divert this person from jail to a mental health hold.
That's correct.
So what happens if it's like after crew hours or something like that? I mean, can you say something about what? Like, are there times where, what would happen to this person if it was some strange time where you didn't have staff?
Yeah, it's hard to prove what didn't happen, right? So this is a unique instance where we know that the person was demanding to be arrested. No one wanted to arrest the person, but yet you had a store that was pressing charges that carried an arrestable charge. I think there was a couple of different ways it could have gone. He probably could have been, and I'm not an officer, so officer. You might have to correct me, but I think what could have happened is he probably could have been processed and released directly from there, but he wouldn't have been better off for that moment in time because he was determined to go back to the store and stand up for his rights, as he was saying. So it might have just turned into a cycle that day of a couple of trespassing charges. He could have been transported if he was going to be continuing to trespass. He could have been transported to Adams County Detention Facility. At that point, he probably would have been assessed and been put on an M1 as well.
Okay, and so you're talking about how these 2 new staff members are going to, you're going to increase some hours.
Sure.
Do you ever see a point where it needs to be 24 hours a day, or?
That's a great question, and it's one that's being assessed across the county. No other crew unit, lack of better, co-responder unit is 24/7. Adams County is about to do a 24/7, so we will be watching their data to see what their grave shift, that's what that shift would be, is the grave shift, how much interaction they have. I think a lot of our grave shift is responding to people's homes or traffic situations. That would not be mental health because a lot of places are closed in the middle of the night. So you don't have as many people noticing odd behavior and then reporting it. And then you also have sleeping hours. So people are at rest and maybe not communicating as much in their own homes. So it's data that we will have access to without having to try it. I'm hopeful if Adams County can get their entire staffing unit done. Now they are doing, so we have 5 people on our crew team. Adams County will have 7. They'll have a supervisor and 6 co-responders. And we have a supervisor and 4 co-responders at this point in time. And so they're hopeful to staff a 24/7 unit with that. I don't know how that's going to go. I think they're going to move forward with a 24/7 staffing model. I think it'll keep them pretty busy, so we'll have to look at what those numbers look like across the entire county. But
Okay, great, that's good to know, thank you.
yeah, I'm excited to watch it as well.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for being here, and thank you for everything that you and crew do, as always. I have a couple of questions. Very interested in the TVP.
Yeah.
And what that looks like in terms of potential collaboration, because I assume there's a lot of stakeholders that need to be involved. Of course, Adams 12, just looking at that case study with the teen.
Yep.
And that's part of it. Is there opportunities to be more connected and involved on a regional level with other municipalities? I forgot who you said already has
Sure.
the program up and running.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering how that'll work, because I know a lot of these programs that have been set up involve even state level collaboration. So is that, something that's it's gonna expand to, obviously start small?
Yeah.
Go from there.
So the Targeted Violence Prevention Program that we're starting here in North Glen will have a core team, and that's been established. And those are all people within the police department, but multidisciplinary. And then each case that comes through that works on it creates its own team. So you have your own, and targeted violence prevention really only works when you have multidisciplinary teams. So, because the product of the targeted violence prevention is what's called a BTAM, which is a behavioral threat and management plan. And if you don't have a management plan, then you don't have a BTAM. So the goal is to create a behavioral threat and management plan. And so the plan is really only implemented with people that the person is closely associated with. So it could be their places of employment, it could be their schools that they go to, it could be their higher education, it could be their family members, it could be their therapists. So each case is a little bit different, and it's also getting the correct legal ways to talk to all those different people. So sometimes that's working with the individual themselves, getting a release of information that you're able to have those communications across the different disciplines. So yes, it will be a large coordinated effort. With this kiddo that was in the case study, that was a large coordinated effort with Adams 12 and the school district, as well as their security personnel, as well as the person's therapist, as well as CPS, as well as Thornton Police Department. And so that's just an organic plan that came together for that individual. So it's nice to have working relationships across all of those different fields, but they won't be the core team because they won't have everything to do with all the different clients that we'll be working with.
Okay, no, that's great. Are there plans to do like outreach to say, to businesses, I'm just using an example, businesses in Northland, hey, we have this program. If you see something that needs attention or need this assessment, or is it just,
That's a great
one
question, and that's where a lot of them
Yeah.
go towards, right? Where we're talking about is advertising this targeted violence prevention program to organizations within North Glen, and that would be a larger conversation, most likely with Corey, possibly asking council if that's the direction you want the targeted violence prevention to go, and just looking at what that would mean. Right now, it's just for people who are coming across the North Glen Police Departments or the city's purview.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. And then one more question. Yeah, bummer about the grants that you didn't get. Great work on trying, though. And it had rung a bell, so I was trying to look it up. I think maybe it was on the Public Safety Service Committee that I'm serving on the federal level. But DHS, Department of Homeland Security, also had like $18 million for these specific type programs.
Oh, really? Yeah. So I think what happened was so I went to a meeting with members from Kayak, Colorado Information Analysis Center. They were the ones who pointed me to the DOJ grant that I applied for, but Kayak also has an outreach team now, and they want to partner with people who are creating TVP programs, and they said that they would also assist in looking for funding. And I think the goal is to help them, or for them to help us kind of regionally, because we do have a large crossover with Thornton, with Westminster. I know Lakewood is starting their TVP program. They came to our training here in North Glen. And so having that regional approach that the Kayak really helps assists.
That's excellent. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Nowicki, did you put your hand down? You're good, okay. Well, I would echo a lot of what you heard. Like, this is another very thorough presentation. It's a program you should be really proud of because you've definitely been leading the way in Adams County, and it is nice to see more people coming on board. But your work with our police department is pretty impressive, so.
Thank you.
And it is nice to see the data as well.
Yep.
And look at those sheer numbers of people that you're helping and the services you're providing. It's beyond impressive, so thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for your time tonight.
Yep. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is our traffic calming policy update. Director of Public Works, Sarah Borgers, is here to introduce this item.
Mayor and City Council, it's lovely to be with you again tonight. We are here tonight to talk about traffic calming policy. I wanted to preface before we get into the presentation that oftentimes when we are up here, we are providing kind of engineering judgment or kind of professional expertise. This one is really a lot to do with policy and what council wants to see. So we have some slides that say recommendation, but just know that's a starting place for you to let us know how you would like us to proceed forward. I will not be presenting tonight, though. I have Greg Cothey here, who's going to be giving the presentation. Greg is one of our engineers, and I believe you've seen him before. He gave the last traffic calming presentation. So with that, I'll turn it over to him.
Good evening. Good evening, Madam Mayor and City Council. My name is Gregory Cothey. I'm a civil engineer for the City of North Glen. And this evening I present to you a recommendation on an amendment to our current traffic calming policy. Okay, we are here to discuss adding a new section to the city's traffic calming policy to facilitate community-driven removal of traffic calming infrastructure. So this stems from Livingston Drive, which was repaved this last summer. As part of our repaving efforts, the 3 speed humps were removed. Our plans initially were to reinstall those speed humps. However, a few residents raised concerns about the installation of the speed humps. Hearing these concerns, City Council asked for further consideration on these speed humps and paused their reinstallation. This highlighted that the city does not have a policy that advises how and when traffic calming measures can be removed. So we did some research and put together a recommendation for such an amendment to be added to the policy. In preparation for the recommendation, I did some research on some surrounding jurisdictions on what they do. We found that Adams County required 95% of the affected residents must sign the petition, and of those 95%, 75% must be in favor of removal. And if scheduled to be resurfaced, the county will pay for the speed hump removal. Otherwise, if the neighborhood wants it removed sooner, they will pay. And Jefferson County is very similar. They require 75% of residents to support removal, and the county will pay for it if it's scheduled to be resurfaced. If the neighborhood wants it sooner, they will pay. Larimer County requires 65% of the affected residents to support removal, and residents bear 100% of the cost of that. And note that this is only for speed hump removal. I didn't find anything for removal of any other infrastructure. So to summarize that policy data, a majority of those in the affected area must agree that the speed humps shall be removed, and the residents bear 100% of the removal cost unless the street is to be repaved. So we recommend adding an amendment to the traffic calming policy, which will give residents a pathway towards traffic calming removal. The resident will request a petition from the city in the same manner as they would for a traffic calming study. If more than 50% of the residents in the affected area sign the petition for traffic calming removal, the city will proceed with removal. For speed humps, traffic circles, and other devices in the roadway, removal will take place during the next scheduled repaving of the street at no cost to the residents. If the residents want removal sooner, they must pay 100% of the removal cost. Removal of roadway striping will not be considered. Roadway striping won't be considered because removal of striping contradicts the city's transportation and mobility plans, which involve adding dedicated and shared bike lanes. Once traffic calming devices are removed, the city will conduct a speed study. If warranted, the city will consider alternative traffic calming measures. And I'll open the floor to questions.
Councilmember Jaramillo.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the update and recommendation. This might be a question for Director Borgers, but this past week I had a resident ask me why there's not a raised crosswalk along the trail that goes in Ward 2. So 112th Place has one, 115th Place has one, and so does Phillips Drive. 2 of them are in school districts, or school zones, and the other ones that do not have a raised crosswalk is Graves Court, Truda Drive, and East 119th Place. And they're wondering how we can create that continuity along there since the raised sidewalk is one of the tools we have in our toolbox. I wanted to know how we can implement that there. Do you have to sign petitions for it, or is it or can we just as a city create that continuity along that plane?
So those raised crosswalks, I believe, were the result of a speed study, and the speeds were deemed in excess, and the residents voted on a raised crosswalk. So we can do the same on the other streets, Graves Court and Truda Drive, and any other street really. Resident would just need to contact me. I would issue a petition. All we need is 5 signatures, and we'd do a speed study. And if speeds are in excess, that can be an option.
Okay, and this is the same speed study, the same no need for speed? It's the same one?
It's the same one, yes.
Okay, and if that speed study does meet the criteria, will that also include the blinking beacons? I forget what they're called, the flashing crossing beacons?
It can be if the residents vote for that.
Okay, great.
I would recommend it if it qualified.
Awesome, yeah, that's the questions I had, and also some of my constituents in Ward 2. Thank you.
So I know we have more hands. I just want to make sure that we're talking about the right thing. We have a traffic calming policy, and council asked you to bring back a small addition because we did not have a policy to remove speed bumps.
Correct.
And so that's why this is 3 slides long.
Very
right?
short.
Is because it's a very narrow focus for tonight's discussion. So I think, well, I know that there's a lot of conversation about speeding and traffic in our city, and I think we need to find another time with our city manager to add that discussion to the agenda. But tonight, we're just talking about this speed hump removal policy, correct?
Correct.
Great. Councilmember Kondo?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, I guess my question would be for City Attorney Hoffman. So is there any liability exposure if the city were to remove a safety feature that was demanded by the citizenry?
None whatsoever. It's subject to the Colorado Governmental Immunity Act, so the answer is no.
Okay. And looking at the Adams County policy, they established that of 95% of the people that are signed on the petition, they wanted 75% to indicate that they want to remove the safety feature. I'm just curious, how did we establish 50%?
I just wanted basically a non-arbitrary number. I didn't want to say a random 75%, because then I would have to justify that. I just chose a majority over 50%, more opposing than wanting to keep them.
Okay, gotcha. Because, what begs the question is, do we want to follow, say, a number that was established by another local government? Because maybe they're kind of setting precedent, so to speak. But I'm not the lawyer. I just thought I'd put that out there for discussion.
So I think one of the fundamental pieces of this is that these are requests to put in and to remove. These would not be required under any sort of traffic engineering analysis. Where the city could have an issue related to liability is if there was something that was installed in accordance with a national standard, and then the city removed that. We're not talking about anything like that.
Councilmember Nowicki?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Director Borders and Mr. Koth for being here. So a couple of things. What constitutes an affected area?
It's determined by staff, but I'll use Livingston as an example. Anyone who lives along Livingston where the speed humps are would be the affected area.
Okay, so I live on Claude Court, so that would be, Claude Court currently has speed bumps down the entire thing. So that would be everyone. What about, there are neighbors that their houses butt against the street, but it's kind of like their backyards, so it's not necessarily a residence.
I would define it as front yard facing the street.
Okay, so I think maybe just want a little more clarity around that piece. I'm torn about this. This is interesting to me, and I guess I'm having this kind of reaction because I live on Claude Court, and one of the things I've thought about, I love living in North Glen. One of the things I've thought about is I wish I had it's almost like if I could live in my house and see the traffic going down my street, that's the one thing that makes me consider moving, right? And I'm not considering moving, but I say, thank God those speed bumps are there, because I have a daughter and one on the way, and they're gonna start riding bikes. The one thing I do now is park my car in front of the driveway, because even with the speed bumps, people haul butt down the street. I admit I get a little bit fearful when I think that, and I know not everybody likes the speed bumps, that my neighbor next door actually helped get the petition to put them in, but that someone could come along and kind of raise just above 50% and all the speed bumps would be removed. I don't know, that feels concerning to me.
Yeah, I understand your concern, and this is just a jumping off point. We could choose a higher threshold. I mean, perhaps this does warrant a higher threshold, but.
Right, and I was mention to Councilmember Condo's point, kind of maybe going for a larger threshold. Certainly, I want all community members to have their voice. But this is kind of my own personal stuff I'm bringing up. I did have a question. What happens to kind of all the work that's done previous to that? So in order to get the speed bumps put on Claude Court, they had to do this safety study, speed stuff. That all kind of costs money. That just kind of goes away, am I to assume? Or that information is retained, but it's put in a file somewhere.
Yeah, are you talking about the speeding that was taking place before, or the construction?
In order to do the study and then to put the speed bumps in, they had to collect data, and then if they come along and they decide, oh, we don't want the speed bumps, which the only threshold for that is not necessarily a speed bump, or like a speed study to see if the speed bumps are doing their job. I guess what happens to kind of all of that work done prior? It almost feels like it just kind of goes away.
Doesn't completely, because we do speed studies after, let's say they were to be removed, we would do one after. If speeds are in excess, then we would explore with the community, since they wouldn't want speed humps, we would explore alternative measures, like roadway striping, we could do chicanes, other alternative measures, if speed humps are that unpopular on the street.
Okay.
We wouldn't just leave it and forget it.
To answer your question more directly, Councilmember Nowicki, this city, anytime we make an improvement on a roadway, that comes along with spending city funding to make that improvement. So there is a cost associated with any traffic calming improvement that we make.
Right.
That depending on how you look at the situation, what the ROI would be if the speed humps are down for 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. It really depends on how you look at the situation. So you could consider that a non-issue. You could consider that a potential con of this program, but there are city funds expended with every roadway improvement that we make with the traffic calming program.
Right. Okay. And then I guess the last point, and maybe this is just something to think about, how long after, like say they get speed bumps removed, and the mayor mentioned it, one of the largest issues I hear is speeding. And I understand, that not all the residents like this and that there are certainly downsides, but this, I would say that it probably does help deter speeding in some regard. How long after if all the residents start to say, well, the speed bumps are gone and we notice people are going 80 miles an hour down Claude Court, how long before I need to can start a speed study in order to get the speed bumps kind of put back?
Generally, I'd say similar to the traffic calming policy, a calendar year after the previous test. So if speeding is an issue, if speeding is an issue to a resident, then we would do the similar traffic calming speed study as we would per the current policy.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Councilmember Burns.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you so much for being here this evening and this presentation. It's hard. It is so dark so early now. So I guess
since it's a study session, I think we're looking for a consensus and like general thoughts on this. Like, I'm fine probably with a higher threshold other than 50%, because I do wonder, like, we've already gone through the process of doing the speed study. I think it's specifically the incident we are talking about on Livingston. We found that there is still a need for this. There was still speeding. And so I wonder where that factors into this all, because, do we just let the residents decide, because they're adults, and we can be like, there is still speeding, but if you want to take the speed humps away, that's your prerogative as adults. I think that's fine, but then I do think we need to like raise the threshold to like that 95, 75 and give people the data to like make their decisions. And I'm also okay with the like resurfacing schedule, otherwise like that's cash out of your pocket. Because I do just keep thinking about this initial, like, I'm fine, like, writing this policy just for the future, but I do keep thinking back to the initial residents who came and spoke about this, and it was about aesthetics, which I don't think should factor into safety. But yeah, I think, like, that is sort of, like, where I'm at with this.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for being here. To clarify, that was only one resident. The multiple residents, because this is Ward 4, so Councilmember Roper and I can speak to, there were many other residents besides aesthetics, and aesthetics was not the issue. To keep it focused on Livingston and get a little bit more clarification, you said that you looked at what the Adams County and Larimer County is doing, but that's countywide. So are there any specific examples? And I guess that's kind of expanding on what Councilmember Kondo is asking in terms of what cities are actually doing. Because to me, I look at the county and that feels a lot bigger and more different and more involved to say, this is 100% of the costs need to be covered if you want to remove these sooner, for example. So what was the reasoning behind that? And were you able to find any local examples, like cities within counties? Is anybody doing anything like this? I see heads shaking.
I was unable to find any city that had one, just counties.
Okay. And then, so to follow up on Livingston, my understanding after that the humps were removed was that there's going to be a community meeting. I don't believe that's happened yet, or I haven't gotten an update on that yet, and I don't, Councilmember Roper probably hasn't as well, because we were just trying to figure out what's going on. So it's not policy yet, but it looks like that you all did already do something similar to what you're asking for, that you did another speed study right after, is that correct?
On Livingston, correct.
On Livingston.
Two, one in August, one in October.
There was another one done in October?
Yes.
Okay. I saw an email on the one in August, but not in October, so what was the result of that?
So August was 29.8 and October was 30.4. It's one data point higher.
Okay.
It's the way the radars collect data.
Okay, that makes sense. And your email, or whoever's email it was, maybe it was Director Borgers, said that that was kind of to be expected, that right after removing the humps, maybe, there'd be a little bit of a slowdown, still kind of high. So the area still qualifies. And I assume in here, there will be another neighborhood meeting to determine what that should be. I agree that there should be a higher threshold. Where I'm less sold on is having residents pay 100% of the removal costs, especially when it's a county example. So that's where I kind of am right now, that I do agree that maybe a higher threshold for removing in the future is a good idea. But also, for this Livingston specific example, there needs to be maybe something in here too, that there should be a community meeting as well, like spelled out. And that's my 2 cents right now. Thank you.
So we have the benefit of looking at these slides again, but can you go back to a couple just to kind of review for our residents during discussion? So if you go back to the county examples, I think this is great. Thank you for pulling that up. I guess I'm going back because this isn't just about Livingston. So Livingston, that situation came, we decided to do this policy because of that example. And because we had residents here and we were kind of like, we don't have a policy to make these decisions against. And that's what we do as policymakers. So that's how we got here. But we've had a lot of conversations with residents about roundabouts, or we put things in and they don't want them in, or they don't work, and we need to have a conversation, and we just didn't have a policy in place. So when I looked at this, I was like, well, it seems pretty, I don't know, it's kind of shallow as policy goes. It's not very big. So if we go to the staff recommendation on page 6, these look to be a little more meaty as far as what the recommendation is. So if the resident requests the petition, more than half, the city will proceed, but I'm hearing that council may want to increase that instead of 50%, maybe 75 or 80. And then it's no cost if they wait until the next scheduled repaving. I think that's a really interesting one, because that could be years down the road. And so that's not going to help them. Like if it's just happened and they're mad about it, they're gonna come in and say, well, I either have to pay for all of it now, which we know if you've got 20 residents, that's still a ridiculous amount of money. They have to be very, very passionate about it. So I feel like we've almost created a policy that is not user-friendly. Like if I was a resident and say, I mean, I am a resident, but if I had a situation where it was put up and it was wrong and it didn't work, and I came to council and said, hey, I need you to help me. And it's like, well, you can wait till we repave it again. And that's probably 7 to 8 years down the road, right? That may deter me, as Councilmember Nowicki said, to even stay. I'd be like, oh, I have this huge problem. It's not going to be fixed for years. Or I can get my closest buddies together and we can each drop, what, 10 grand? I mean, how much is it to remove those? It's super expensive.
Probably be around 10 grand each. give or
Right.
take.
Okay, that's what I was estimating. I understand taking the roadway striping, not a consideration, so I'm on board with that one. And then the final piece of, once we've taken it away, we're gonna do a speed study, and then we're gonna think about alternative traffic calming measures. That last one feels like where we left the Livingston meeting. And so I was like, okay, that makes sense. I am wondering, if there was a place we took out a roundabout, if we've done that, if we've thought about alternatives, if we've done a speed study since then, because Livingston is really not the only place that we have this issue. So I'm just feeling like the first one seems to make sense to me, but the second 2 or second 3 bullets, I just don't get it. So I'm trying to figure out how this is something that can actually be used and not just be a deterrent to the resident from even petitioning this in the first place. That's kind of where I'm sitting. I'm like, I think it's okay in structure, but I think we have more work to do to dig in with options. And we kind of have council members all over the place. So I don't know if if we need more information to dig in deeper, or.
Perhaps council might want to have this conversation from a different starting point. I think staff was trying to be very responsive about the removal of, and as you can see from the research, Greg had a hard time finding examples at the municipal level, because without speaking for those entities, I don't believe it's done in terms of removal or what prompts the removal. I would have to reach out to my colleagues and say, have you ever removed a traffic calming improvement, and why? I think perhaps we need to go back to, why do we have a traffic calming program policy? what do we want it to look like? Because historically, in the time that I've been here, we've made improvements. You've heard me use this phrase, we've added more tools to the toolbox. So for example, we've added roundabouts, right? We have not to date removed a roundabout. That would be a more costly improvement to remove if we did remove it. So I think going back to when we made modifications to the program in 2019, 2020, the intent was to get more residents involved in having a voice on the street that was of concern in shaping and choosing what improvements they wanted to see. So prior to 2019-ish, it was very much council's decision, to my knowledge, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong. Council played the primary role working with staff in determining what traffic calming improvements look like on a roadway. Speed humps were one of the most commonly talked about improvements. We added more tools to the toolbox over time, reshaped the process to where the threshold from a petition perspective was lower to having 5 signatures required, and added the community meeting pieces. So I think maybe it's coming back full circle, Mayor and Council, and starting from the place of what do we want this program to look like? Knowing that there's these different scenarios that have occurred over time, and, you know, our goal as a city government is to be responsive, to provide safe streets to travel on for both motorists and pedestrians. So how do we want to get there, knowing that these different scenarios have come up? And we know anytime we think we may be addressing one issue, we could be creating another issue. So those are some initial thoughts off the top of my head. It may be taking a step back, having a broader discussion about the overall program. This presentation was in response to the specific direction of, can we remove improvements? And so this is what we came up with. And, you know, staff can certainly remove any of the bulleted items that council, based on consensus, does not want to see. But based on some of the questions that I'm hearing council ask, it might be worth taking that step back and having a broader conversation. One suggestion, but not necessary if council doesn't want to do that.
No, I appreciate that suggestion, especially because, you know, right out of the gate, we had questions about the overall policy as opposed to just the very, very narrow recommendation for tonight's agenda item. And I think it's because it naturally lends itself to look at the entire policy. And we also know that we've had some news in the last couple weeks, a little coverage about our traffic calming policy and either how long it takes, how hard it is to get through. And so to Councilmember Jaramillo's point, like, maybe we do need to just zoom out, and keeping it so narrow tonight is not, it's not gonna get us to a resolution. And, because I pulled up the website, and I'm like, there's a lot here, and I think there's a lot here that we've been sort of circling around for maybe a couple years. and I think probably we just need to really dig in and go deeper with the entire policy. But during that process, make sure this part is addressed, because it wasn't there before.
We can do that if that's what council would like us to do.
So there's a lot of hands up, so we'll see if they can respond to that. Councilmember Roper?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to say, I do agree with, sorry, got thrown off. I do agree with Mayor Pro Tem's point. Just, I want to bring it back to also that, and you kind of said it, City Manager, we want more residents involved in having a voice about what's happening on their street. And we did promise our residents that they would have that meeting. And so I think it is important that we hold up our end of the bargain on that. And as far as raising the, I guess, the bar for the amount of residents, I would like to see it raised so that it is a greater percentage that need to agree with the removal of this. And it does seem like we need to go back and revisit more than just this one simple policy. We need to go back and look at the bigger scope of things.
Councilmember Goff?
Thank you, Mayor. So the one thing that comes to my mind is that the residents organized and came together after the speed humps were removed because of the repaving, and they realized they didn't want them anymore, or whatever. I guess I feel like it should not be that easy to remove a speed safety measure after we've gone through a robust process in getting input on doing it and putting it in the first place. And I feel like that, maybe the motivation for people to come forward was that they knew it could just be so easy to not have them put back, rather than asking us to pay, use more of our taxpayer money to actually remove them. So I think that if we are going to remove something, it should be a higher percentage of residents, and I think the 75% would be fine. And I also think that it's not unreasonable to ask the residents to wait until we do repaving to, have the city just do it completely. I just feel like we don't want to make it too easy, and we're constantly going to be putting things in and taking them out and putting them in. I mean, if somebody moves and new people move in, then they don't like it, and, so then we start this whole, going back and forth thing. So I think I think our current process, it seems to be working, except for a couple of cases where, we as a group have come together and, tried to address it. So I'm fine with just adding this language around the removal of traffic calming measures. But anyway, that's my 2 cents.
I would like to lean in a little bit, Catherine, or Councilmember Goff, sorry, and find out, what about our current policy you think is working? Because we get a lot of feedback about it from our residents. So are there pieces that you like that we want to keep?
Well, I just feel like does give, the process gives residents a chance to give input. And but it's also, it makes it so that you have to have enough people who agree, so that you don't just have one person, the squeaky wheel, getting, what they want. So, I mean, we've had requests and we've had traffic calming measures installed because of this process. So, I mean, I don't know. I think and maybe, my perceptions on it are a little bit off, but what I hear, the complaints from residents are about speeding. And I don't know that, we could put in all the traffic measures and have speed humps, every other block, and we're still occasionally going to have people speeding. So I just don't know, where you draw the line, how do you make that balance?
Okay. I feel like there's a flip side to it, back to City Manager Geyer's point. Like, if I'm looking at, to put them in, I only need 5 signatures to have a conversation. And depending on the size of the street, that can actually be a small percentage of the residents on that street or the residents that travel that street. There's also the piece of, if that's my way in and out of my neighborhood, it's impacting more than just the 5 houses in front of it. And so that number might feel low. I feel like that's the same amount we need to get a big trash container out front. So I just wonder about, I guess I'm still advocating that we take a look at it in its wholeness. But I hear what you're saying. Councilmember Nowicki?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would be in favor, I think, of kind of revisiting that larger discussion around the whole policy as well. Just one point of clarification, on the 4th bullet point there. Would this just be the residents who want the removal, or would be all the residents in that affected area would be asked to pay?
I would say the residents that want removal,
Okay.
but I don't think that was in the policies of the county. I'm just making an assumption.
Right. Okay.
That's a good point, because we don't want to be charging people for something they didn't.
Yeah.
Councilmember Burns?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm in complete agreement with taking a look at this whole policy because I feel like we're literally coming full circle because to get these traffic humps, just to use Livingston as an example, they went through that process. We saw the printouts that they asked for these and now they're asking for something different. And I understand our policy has evolved and like now we work with residents more to say like, well, if it's not speed humps, is it this, that, or the third? We have a lot more tools in our toolbox. And I think finding the right fit for each individual street and community is important, but I feel like we can't just like snip, snap, decisions like that, especially when there's, you know, we just had our budget discussion. I think we're thinking about, you know, all of a sudden I'm looking at costs of things, you know. I think there is a point that like, okay, like maybe we do need to checks and balances the upfront policy of like, maybe it's more than just 5 people. And like, I just think we just need to pull back and figure this out because, yeah, we can't just have, because the other thing I'm thinking about is that first traffic calming resident survey. The people who spoke in front of us, again, this is, you know, he said, she said kind of information that like they claimed that most of the residents didn't remember signing it. So I just like, I would like to think about this more of like an in-depth process of like working with the community so people will remember asking for things like this. And then I just think it's like, I agree that it just needs to be more of a thoughtful decision at the front end and the back end of like, how does this all work together and what is the best way to move forward? That's kind of where I'm sitting. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks again to both of you for being here. And I know it's a lot, and we ask and dig a lot. And I know it's more than Livingston, but I know this was kind of what started the whole thing. And it was prior to when we had an official traffic calming, no need for speed program. That happened afterwards. So I do think that taking a deeper dive, as the mayor said, into the actual policy around it is super important. So I would be 100% in favor of that. Perhaps increasing it, not making it a barrier, but maybe increasing it to more than just 5 households. Again, not wanting it to be a barrier for people to start a traffic calming petition at all. But considering how all of this evolved off of one street, you know, it can happen again in the future, which is why we need to tighten those policies down. The one that I would really love to dig in more is that residents having to pay for removal and, you know, what that would look like, because I get what Councilmember Goff is saying, but also the mayor had a good point, you know, making it a barrier to waiting 7, 8 years till the next street is removed, or till the next street is repaved, till the street is repaved is what I'm trying to say. So either way, I'm in support of taking a deeper dive and looking into what that could possibly look like, and buttoning down what those numbers are. And I'll just reiterate, I'm in favor of it making maybe a higher threshold, so it's, when it comes to removing it, it probably should be more. Because we did hear from, I think, one person on the street who wanted to keep the speed humps, which again is why that neighborhood, you know, involvement is also, it has to be there, I think, still. Thank you.
This is super tricky, because even with that meeting that we had, we did have residents on both sides of the issue, and even if it's 50-50, the fact that they put them up meant that there was a need. I think we're in a curious situation about this one because of the repaving. I don't know, it's crazy. I still think that we can look at it together, and there are municipalities that have traffic calming policies, so they may not include the removal component, but maybe there's more we can pull to look at and get some examples. Because the other thing that we've talked about over time is, you know, what is the threshold criteria for a city or a street to even be discussed? Some of those other nuance pieces, as far as what's the, whatever that number was that the speed has to hit and the no need for speed, and we would go back and forth around what's too close, what's not close enough. I don't know. It feels like it might be time. So.
Yes, if council wants to provide consensus, what I'm hearing, and you tell me if I haven't captured this correctly, council's request is to revisit the city's traffic calming policy, to have an in-depth study session discussion about all the elements of what makes up that traffic calming policy and the no need for speed process, and for staff to provide information on traffic calming policies by other municipalities as part of the background information that we'll provide for that staff memorandum.
I wonder if there's an opportunity. It feels like, I mean, it's going to take a while. This is not an overnight thing, but could staff pull together the policies and somehow try to highlight the best of each one based on pretty, I don't know, recent council conversations about no need for speed and some of the pushback and some of the recent questions? I don't know. Can you synthesize a little bit more, or is it something
Absolutely, yeah.
that you want us to kind of dig in and do like a work session type thing?
I think it's a work session because I
Okay.
think we have the bones of that presentation already. I think it was March of this year. We had a presentation where we had updated information from other municipalities. So I think number one, we'll go back and I'll relook at what comparisons we used. And if we need to expand and broaden the comparisons, Jason and I will try to make sure we look at the information from that lens as well as Sarah. Sarah's new to this conversation, not in her work as an engineer, but in terms of the city's conversation. And then we'll really draw out all the elements, and without creating a lengthy PowerPoint, we will not regurgitate history that is not helpful. But we can highlight what tweaks we have made, because it's important for council to know you've had a traffic calming policy for some time. We've gone back and forth in terms of the council used to decide, the residents are deciding. A check and balance is that the budget request comes to council. So we'll try to spell out those pieces so it's easily digestible and helpful so that you all can work with information in terms of the conversation you'll have. So there's a lot there, but we'll try to make it easily digestible and usable in terms of the conversation you want to have. I think we're pretty clear on what that is. And then figure out where you want to go. I would recommend that you don't take any action on this particular piece. And that perhaps I even go one step further, and staff can react to this, that we go ahead and put a hold on the overall program until council has this conversation and we're all in agreement of how do you want this to look. So, I mean, in terms of talking about the Ward 2 situation with Irma and Truda, Irma is not a qualifying roadway, Truda is, and so we have a resident that's circulated a petition, has numerous signatures per what has been communicated to me from the resident directly as well as the news story. So that has not been handed over to staff to my knowledge unless that was brought in this week. So we've got to decide, there are certain things in the works. So we do need to have the Livingston meeting with residents that we committed to, and that is going to happen. Just has not yet been communicated to council. We have the Ward 2 situation. How many other requests do we have in the queue, Gregory?
I don't believe any right now. Winter
Okay.
is the fall and winter are pretty slow.
So it probably is a good time to go ahead and hit pause, to not accept new applications until or council says, well, let's figure out what we can do with the Ward 2 request, but not accept new applications. And that would mean that Greg would put a note on the website, the city website, on that no need for speed page, and say, city council's reevaluating the traffic calming policy. For more information, contact Greg, but we're not accepting new applications at this point in time. So we really figure out what it is that council wants to do in regards to being responsive to resident requests, because it is a huge significant topic in our city.
Oh, it is. It's every week. But I wonder, so this feels like, again, this little teeny piece of the pie, little teeny like, hey, let's fix this, and then we can resolve the Livingston situation. So is stopping this conversation going to stop that resolution?
No, not in my mind. I would say we will have a meeting with the residents on Livingston and recommend, based on that second speed study, some options for them. I mean, the challenge lies in, so if council's okay with continuing that and the residents deciding, and if the residents say we want striping, great, they're gonna get striping, that would be budgeted in next year's budget. It would. Right, because now we're gonna be in winter months and so that work wouldn't get done. So that would be a way to resolve Livingston. I mean, it could be a potential, I don't know if this would happen, that we have a meeting with residents and the residents say, we really want speed humps back. So then bring budget for speed humps next year. In terms of putting anything about removal out there, I think that'll really complicate the overall conversation, and we'll get a ton of requests, perhaps, maybe not.
No, you will.
To remove improvements. And I think we do, a really foundational element of this conversation is the investment that the city has made, because over the past 6 years, the city has invested more funding in traffic calming improvements and school zone improvements than we have historically. And so what do you want that ROI to look like? It's not to say you can't ever remove something, but at what point is council comfortable saying we made this financial investment and now we need to pivot and do something different because things change, right? But what are you comfortable with knowing that there's thousands of dollars spent to make those initial improvements? So that's an important piece of the conversation that I would like you all to have, so that way we know we're being
So as
responsive.
you mentioned, there's recent meetings and there's previous meetings, and we've talked about it, and the policy has been in place for a while. My experience has been that it's always been with some element of strife. So while it was a policy in place, there always seemed to be something butting up against it that was causing tension. And that's why the conversation keeps circulating back from council and different iterations of council, is because it is a really hot topic. So I think if we can dig in, I mean, it won't be perfect, but it might be perfect for now, because time does change traffic patterns in neighborhoods. So I don't know. Councilmember Nowicki?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You mentioned kind of this city manager guy, you mentioned kind of this cutoff point. Councilmember Jaramillo and I, and he kind of referenced this, did have a discussion this week and last week with a resident about kind of prompting this study session. So I'd kind of like to, I'd hate for him to kind of get the cutoff point. So, and I'm happy to talk to you about this kind of offline. But if we're gonna do this like cutoff point now, and this resident comes in, you know, a week from now with like, hey, I got the signatures, you know. So I just want to throw that out there.
I think that's part of the challenge, right? If someone brings in a petition tomorrow or even next week, I mean, unless council tells me differently, we can go ahead and process it. Gregory would be responsible for doing that and schedule the speed study and that sort of thing. So we can keep doing that. I tossed it out as an option of hitting pause because what I'm finding with these improvements is even though we've made different changes along the way, in response, we're still having this conversation and there's frustrations and tensions and everything in between. And I don't think we'll ever be able to create a perfect system, but even with adding new tools to the toolbox, setting up safety sensitive zones, doing targeted enforcement by the police department. I think we just need to have the conversation from a different starting place and figure out what can we do and what does council want to see and who are the decision makers at what levels in the process. And, I mean, if there's something out there that we're not doing or we can be doing better from a continuous learning perspective, we also need to capture that as well. So we don't have to hit pause. I just threw that out there because it would keep it a bit cleaner unless council's okay with, well, we're going to focus on having this larger policy, broader policy discussion, but we know that these other requests are in the queue. That would follow the current process. And so the resident involvement would be subject to that, the current process. Because if we come up with something over here and council's like, well, it's weird to divert a request midstream to and have new rules apply, if that makes sense.
Councilmember Burns?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I hear you, City Manager Guyer. I'm gonna wear my day job hat a little bit on this. I think we constantly are hearing about traffic here, and so I think putting a pause on any kind of way the residents can reach us is not a good idea. I think this is something that we do have to build the plane while we fly it situation. Yeah, that is sort of my perspective on this, is I think we're gonna have to parallel path this for multiple reasons.
Can you say more about that?
I don't ever want to have a situation, I mean, all right, I'm just going to keep it 100. So, we've all been abreast of the various news. We've had, 4 motorcycle deaths in the last 6 months. It doesn't look good. We just had a news story last week. And then all of a sudden, we're just like, we're not going to do traffic calming policies anymore right now. 2 negatives don't make a positive in this situation. So I think we need to hear the residents. I think, and this is where I think we are gonna have to build the plane and fly it, because this very specific, narrow set of 6 bullets came from residents coming forward in one incident. But I think we do need to take a step back and look at, okay, traffic patterns change, population density is changing. What do we need to have a future-proof policy, which I think has been a discussion for a lot of the things we've been talking about lately. And I think that's just the lens we need to take a look at this through, versus how do we Band-Aid, and actually take a more futuristic look of how do we move this. But I am not in favor of pausing before pivoting. Thank you.
I think that's very wise. Thank you. Councilmember Goff?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't disagree with any of that. I just want to point out that the criteria for times of doing the traffic study, there, in some places or locations or whatever, times of the year, they want to do, you want to do it when their school is in session or not in session, or weekdays or not weekdays. So I kind of thought, from what we also heard too, that the winter is not where a lot of these studies take place, or the time that a lot of these studies take place. And then the other thing just would be maybe putting a notice on the webpage where people figure out how to do this process and get the forms or whatever, to warning that this is coming, that, maybe we'll be taking applications till the end of the year, and then at which time we'll pause to, or something, I don't know, some kind of, advance notice. That's all I'm saying on that one.
City Manager Guyer, is there a way to not stop the current plan, since it doesn't sound like there's a crowd backed up, and still work on a new policy at the same time?
Of course there is. I just threw that out there for food for thought,
Okay.
For council's consideration, because the process takes time, so there's also, figuring out, how quickly does council want to move on this? When do you want to have the conversation? Do you want to have the conversation, it's the front end of November? Do you want to have it by the end of November? Have this conversation about traffic calming, and would you like me to schedule a special work session for council to have that conversation? Because realistically, the way the tentative future agendas are programmed right now, there's not a good amount of space for council to have the conversation, knowing that I know you need more time to have a conversation than 30 minutes or 45 minutes. So I would say if you want to have the conversation before year end, it needs to be an additional meeting, or I need to take certain topics off of tentative future agendas and move them into the front end of next year in order to allow for the appropriate space. And if council says, keep the program moving forward, we will do that. And then I think it's a matter of staff informing council of what new requests come in, and where they're at in the process. So we've talked about the Livingston next steps. We're anticipating receiving a petition from Ward 2 residents in regards to Truda and Irma. And I'm not aware of any others at this point.
So can I clarify, because you said work session, which is different than a study session, and is that something where council all brings their own favorite traffic calming policy and we share? Or like, are we going to be highlighting documents, cutting and pasting? Like, what do you envision that looking like in order to move forward?
Sure. Work sessions interchangeable with study sessions. So regardless, it could be either or. If council said we want to utilize an existing study session, you just don't really have that unless I move a bunch of items off of the tentative future agendas before the end of the year. So you could have a special meeting, which would be in a work session format, either in this room, or you could have it in the community rooms or at the rec center. We've used different spaces for those types of sessions. And, I mean, let's talk about what is it that you want. I mean, we can tee it up the way that's going to be most productive for council in terms of if it's a matter of we say, here's some cities to look at, here's some other pieces of information to look at. What do you want the pre-session work to be? We can certainly talk through that. Any guidance from council would be helpful to make sure that it's interactive and it's productive.
Okay. I feel like we're more successful when we have something to respond to, as opposed to trying to create something from scratch on our own. That seems to be true for most things that we're creating. And so for staff to bring forward their expertise and their thinking and their research is super helpful. And then we can respond to it. I don't know what else. I don't know. What does council think? We can just start there.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in speed.
I know.
I'm not an expert in speed studies, so.
Yeah. I mean, I think I don't know, if I'm being really candid, I think we've kind of gone sideways with our traffic calming policy and the no need for speed, because we've gotten pushback on suggestions and creativity and effective implementation of, I don't know, modern design. So it could be the policy, it could be our experience, that it's just not feeling like an effective policy, but maybe that's not because of the words on the page, but because of the implementation and our experience in recent years. So that, I think there's two things to weigh, but as we started talking about this, it feels like it needs to somehow mirror the other one. Like, if you're gonna put it up and change your community, it should take about the same amount of effort to take it down and change your community. Because, and that's, I think, why I was thinking it should be a little bit of a together process. I mean, either way, if you're putting something in or taking something out, it's impacting a whole section and hundreds of drivers potentially, depending on where it is, per day, per hour, who knows? So maybe it's just that this needs to be pushed in there, I don't know. There's a lot to discuss, but I think the more you bring for us to respond to, unless you want us to come with stuff and do our own research and bring it forward.
Do you have any input, Sarah? About? I don't think so. Jason, what?
Sure.
Do either you or Sarah have any input?
Oh, no, I think that it's a great idea, and I think that staff will be able to put together a policy document for council to consider in its entirety, and then also just be able to discuss more deeply about kind of the rationale why certain things are established where they are.
Okay.
So for instance, the conversation tonight, the 50% threshold is significantly greater than the current policy is to get something implemented.
Right.
And so that's why, from a staff standpoint, it's like, well, hey, 50%, more than 50% is much greater than our current policy is to install something.
Right.
And so wanted to balance that out. But hearing the feedback tonight, maybe we can relook at the initial piece and the removal piece and kind of marry those a little bit and just have more thought and discussion from a staff perspective of, hey, why would this make sense or why not? So I think that we can bring that forward in the next few months.
Okay. City Manager Guyer, I don't see, because I also know what the tentative future agendas look like, I don't see this happening before the first of the year. And so I think that was perhaps why the recommendation was to not stop a policy while we're waiting. Because we're pretty busy around here.
We are. No, that's good clarification. I appreciate that. So we'll look at January or early February, if that's okay with council.
Yeah. But we're not stopping or putting an under
No, I did not
sign.
receive that direction.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts from council? No? Okay. Thank you. Thank you, staff, for your time. We appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Are there any other items tonight for council? All right, hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you.